The message should have been harmless. A vacation picture, a sunset selfie with soft light over the water. But when Sophie's smile lit up my phone at 2:13 a.m., something in my chest cracked like glass. I stared at that photo until the edges blurred. She was in a place we had promised each other we'd visit together someday. Her hair catching the last orange of the sky, a drink in her hand, and a caption that laughed about freedom and new friends. My hands shook because we were supposed to be on a weekend trip next month, because we had plans, because we had a ring and a mortgage and a history of small kindnesses that felt like rope holding us together. Instead, I felt unmoored, like a ship suddenly cut loose. How do you explain the quiet, sharp panic of seeing your life in one frame? How do you explain the sudden recognition that a stranger's light is the same one you used to share? I called her name in my head a dozen times, and the word came back thin. Trust. It's a quiet thing until it isn't. We'd built a life on late-night jokes, urgent grocery runs, plans whispered in the dark. My mind started replaying every small lie I had brushed aside, every offhand excuse that suddenly looked like currency in a secret exchange I'd never agreed to. Sophie was the person I trusted to text when the baby was sick, the person who laughed at my worst jokes, the person whose keys hung on the hook by the door. And now her smile in that selfie felt like a message written in a language I didn't know. I felt anger, of course, hot, scrambling anger, but under it was a raw, quieter thing, the ache of being surprised by the person you thought you knew best. I thought of the airport because airports are for departures and arrivals, and I wanted an arrival. I wanted answers. I wanted to see the truth on her face, not in a filtered image. So I went to the printer, folded the papers I had sat on for nights, and rehearsed what I would say. Divorce papers sit on a table like a verdict, sterile and heavy, but I told myself I would be calm, controlled. I would not beg. I would not yell. I pictured Sophie stepping through the sliding doors, suitcase in hand, hair sunlit and real, and me there with those cold pages between us. The whole idea felt insane. Meet her with a legal end instead of a conversation. Yet every step of that plan pulsed with an urgent, frightened logic. If she'd already started a life that didn't include me, I deserved to know where I stood. I remembered small things like the way she used to tuck her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, and the way our son used to climb into our bed on rainy mornings, all the ordinary proof that this was real. Now, ordinary things felt like clues in a mystery. The airport was crowded, the fluorescent lights humming, strangers moving with their own histories, and my palms were slick as I imagined the moment the sliding doors would open. Would she look surprised? Guilty? Hurt? Or would Sophie be smiling the same careful smile from the photo, as if she had every right to be happy without me? I walked toward the terminal, the divorce papers folded in my pocket like a loaded card, and when the doors finally slid open, the person who stepped through took my breath away, but not in the way I expected. We met in a tiny bookstore on a rainy Tuesday, of all places. Sophie was reaching for the same battered copy of a novel I'd loved, and our hands brushed and we laughed like idiots. We spent that whole afternoon in a cafe, until closing, talking about stupid things and big things like what kind of parents we imagine ourselves to be. We moved fast because the calm between us felt like home. We were engaged under a crooked street lamp, married in a small room full of people who mattered, and for years it was soft and easy. We learned each other's coffee order, the way she hummed when she cooked, and the names of the trees along her street. Our son came, and the house filled with noise and sticky hands and bedtime stories. There were ordinary days I loved with a kind of fierce, private hunger. I thought love would keep us safe. I thought trust was built from all those ordinary bricks. But trust, like anything, wears down where you don't pay attention. The first small cracks were not dramatic. They were late nights at the office that became more frequent, a calendar app that blinked team dinner, when she came home smelling faintly of another city, a vanished receipt for a hotel stay that she brushed off as work travel. I found a message once, a line of text that read, "Call me when you're free," with a name I didn't know. She said it was nothing. She lied with the kind of half-truth that feels like pleading. At first I excused myself. I told myself I was being paranoid, that marriage is messy and excuses happen. I had my faults, too. Long work hours, weekends absorbed in emails, nights when I forgot to listen. but excuses piled like cups on the counter, and each one made me pause a little longer before I trusted again. Some things were obvious only in the tiny, aching way they accumulated. She started guarding her phone. She would lock it when I came near, but she said it was a habit. She stopped leaving her keys on the hook. She would answer questions too quickly or too slowly, and the pauses always felt like they were hiding a whole other sentence. We fought less, and then fought worse, the quiet kind that leaves bruises you can't show to friends. When I asked, she cried and apologized. Then she would be kind again, and I would forgive because, of course, I wanted to believe. I wanted to keep the person who tucked our son in at night, the woman who came home with soup when I worked too late. Love makes you hope the worst is just a misunderstanding. That selfie ripped through all of that. It didn't just show a place. It showed a life I hadn't been invited to. It showed new laughter and a sunset that belonged to someone else's quiet. My chest hurt with 1,000 small hurts. Jealousy, humiliation, the ache of being replaced. As I watched Sophie step through those airport doors, my mind went back to moments that had seemed trivial. The sudden silence on certain evenings, the way she'd stopped singing in the kitchen, the way our son sometimes asked where mommy was going, and I had no answer. I wanted context. I wanted a story that made sense. I wanted to be the person who understood, not the person who discovered. She was right there, sun on her hair, eyes avoiding mine for a heartbeat, and then she looked up. For a second, I thought she was about to laugh, like nothing had happened, like this was all a terrible joke. Then something in her face shifted and fear, or something like it, came through. She reached into her bag. My hand went to the pocket where the divorce papers slept. I thought of how many nights I had stayed awake, practicing calm phrases, promising myself I wouldn't ruin our son's world with a scene. I stepped forward, and she met me halfway, and just as her mouth opened to say something, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. The tiny preview on the screen was enough to stop my breath. 3 words I didn't expect. She swallowed, looked back at me, and then, instead of answering, she turned away. She should have stopped and explained. Instead, she walked away like the photo never happened, like the sun on her hair belonged to a story I wasn't in. My feet felt heavy, like I'd already chosen a side and couldn't change my mind. People milled around with luggage and coffee, oblivious. I stood with the divorce papers in my hand and 100 tiny memories in my chest. The sound of her laughing in the dark, the way she used to hum while folding laundry, the first time our son said dada. My head filled with questions that had no polite answers. We had friends who saw us as the couple who made it work. Maya told me once, "You two are solid," and I wanted to believe her. But Maya had texted me a month ago, "Be careful." I saw Sophie with Mark from accounting at that bar. I shrugged it off then. Who knew what 2 people from work talked about? Now that text felt like a seed planted in a field of doubt. What did Mark do? Was he just a colleague, or part of a different life Sophie never showed me? I thought about calling him, but what would I say? "Hey Mark, do you know if my wife is having an affair?" It sounded ridiculous even in my head. There were other small things that could mean anything. A hotel receipt I found under a stack of mail that she said was work. A bracelet she'd left in the laundry that wasn't hers. A voicemail from an unknown number with a choked voice that hung on the edge of words I couldn't make out. Each clue could be nothing. A misread sign, a coincidence, or it could be another piece of a puzzle I didn't want to finish. The worst part was I couldn't tell which. Sophie had reasons for secrets that weren't betrayal. She might be ashamed of something private, or trying to fix a problem she didn't want me to worry about. Or she could be building a life that excluded me. I pictured her side of the story, too. Maybe she'd planned a trip to clear her head because she felt trapped. Maybe the freedom caption was a joke with friends who didn't understand how that word would land in my hands at 2:13 a.m. Maybe she was terrified of telling me about the debt she'd hidden or a job offer that would take her away. People lied to protect people all the time. Could she have lied to shelter me? Or had she been lying to shelter herself? I wanted to ask, but every question felt like a hammer. Our son's small voice kept cutting into my thoughts. He would be awake soon, looking for routine and stability in the warm, ordinary life I wanted to protect. I imagined his sleepy eyes, the way he curled around Sophie at bedtime, his little fingers tracing the ring on her hand. If I made a scene, what would that do to him? If I kept quiet, how long could I stand the quiet between us that screamed? I pictured calling Sophie later and hearing her say, "It's not what you think," and feeling hope rush in, only to have it slip away again. I followed her with my eyes as she moved through the crowd, watched her reach a car parked curbside, and watched her talk quickly to someone I couldn't see. My legs wanted to move. My mouth wanted to scream, to beg, to demand the truth. Instead, I stayed where I was and let the divorce papers burn into my palm. Then Sophie did something small and strange. She dropped a folded receipt as she climbed into the back seat. It fluttered on the ground, half hidden, and for a breath, I thought it might be the end or the start. I stepped forward to pick it up, and at that exact second, her car door closed. I bent and grabbed the receipt before anyone else noticed it, hands still salty from sweat. It was crumpled and warm from where Sophie's fingers had been, and my name for a second felt like a bruise. The hotel name was clear: the Harbor Inn, room 412, paid at 1:58 a.m. The timestamp matched the selfie. There was a tiny scrawl on the corner. Sophie's handwriting, a number I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. The car that had taken her away had already vanished into traffic, and the words on that paper felt louder than anything anyone had said to me that day. I smoothed it out and felt the divorce papers in my pocket like a verdict waiting to be read. Every step I took felt like a gamble. I called Maya first because I needed someone who knew our history. Her voice was small on the other end, like she was trying to be careful. "I told you," she said, and I heard fear under the warning. She told me what she'd seen at the bar, Sophie with Mark from accounting. And then she added something that made my throat close. He didn't look like an office friend. My mind flipped through meetings and birthday cakes, and then the receipts and late nights stitched together into a map I didn't want to read. I asked Maya if she told Sophie I was worried. She said no. She seemed guarded, Maya said, like she was keeping something heavy. Those words felt like a burlap sack dropped at my feet. I found Mark faster than I expected. He answered the phone in 5 rings, voice bright, like he'd been waiting to tell a joke. "Hey man, everything okay?" He sounded too easy. I almost told him to stop smiling, to stop pretending. Instead, I asked, plain and ugly, "Were you with Sophie last night?" He hesitated, that tiny pause that tells more than an answer. "We bumped into each other at a project meeting after hours," he said. "We talked a bit." "Why?" His voice was tight now. I told him about the selfie, about the airport, about the receipt. He swore it was nothing and offered to meet me. I heard the word meet and felt like a fist closed around my chest. Meeting him felt like stepping into a ring. I told him to come to the Harbor Inn. He said he would be there in 20 minutes. He didn't ask why. The lobby of the harbor was small and smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet. Behind the desk, a woman with tired eyes looked at me as if I had brought the weather with me. "Room 412 checked out early," she said before I asked. 2 people, a man and a woman, left at 3:05. Her voice was a kind of quiet that made everything seem official and terrible at once. I asked if she could tell me who paid. She hesitated like hotel staff do when something could be private, then slid a slip across the counter with a partial card number. It matched a card I recognized, an old card Sophie had kept after a bank mix-up. My breath came out like glass breaking. Someone called my name, and I turned. Mark was there, hands shoved in his jacket, eyes not meeting mine. He started to speak and then stopped, like he was choosing his armor. "I didn't know she was married," he blurted, the words tumbling out raw. "I thought she was—" He didn't finish. I wanted to ask him why he'd left so fast last night, who paid, and what he knew. Instead, I walked up the hallway to the elevators because room 412 felt like the answer and the danger all at once. The elevator hummed, and the doors opened. As they closed behind me, I realized Sophie's name was on my tongue like a prayer or an accusation. The elevator climbed, and I felt like I was moving toward a line I didn't want to cross. The corridor carpet smelled faintly of perfume. Outside room 412, a soft light spilled under the door. My hand hovered over the knob. I stood there listening, my hand inches from the knob, when my phone buzzed again. Not Sophie, a number I didn't know. I almost ignored it, but something told me not to. "You don't know me," a woman said, voice tight and low, like she was hiding in a bathroom. "But if you're at the Harbor Inn, Don't go in that room yet. My pulse thudded in my ears. I asked who she was. She didn't answer. Just listen, she said. Sophie isn't doing what you think. The line went dead. I stared at the door, at the thin strip of light under it, and felt the world tilt again. I backed away and sank onto the carpet, my head against the wall. The divorce papers felt heavier now, like they were judging me for being so sure. My mind replayed the call, the hotel slip, Mark's words. What if he really didn't know? What if the room wasn't about romance at all? I remembered Sophie crying that night months ago, saying she felt trapped by something she couldn't name. I remembered her asking about life insurance in a voice too careful, the way she had insisted on updating our wills, just to be safe. I laughed then, and told her she was worried too much. Now, those memories lined up like dominoes. The elevator dinged, and Maya stepped out, breathless, hair mess. She looked at me like she'd been running toward fire. I shouldn't be here, she said. But I found something. She showed me her phone. An email thread forwarded from a burner account, dated weeks back. The subject line made my stomach turn. Urgent, do not tell him. The messages were clipped, professional, full of terms I barely understood. Legal language, medical language. A deadline circled in red. One line stood out like a knife. Airport exchange must not be witnessed. I looked up at Maya, my voice barely there. What is this? She shook her head. I don't know. But Sophie asked me to keep it quiet. She said it was about protecting your family. Protecting us from what? The hallway felt suddenly too quiet, like the building was holding its breath. Mark's footsteps echoed at the far end as he paced, talking fast into his phone. I caught pieces of his words. I swear, she told me. And then he looked up and froze when he saw me watching. He mouthed my name, shook his head, and turned away again. Every person seemed to be carrying a different version of the truth, and none of them fit together cleanly. My phone buzzed once more. This time was Sophie. A single message. Please don't open the door. I can explain. I just need 10 minutes. 10 minutes felt like a lifetime. I stared at room 412 at the light under the door that flickered as if someone moved inside. I thought of our son asleep at home, of vows spoken under a crooked street lamp, of a sunset selfie that started a fire I couldn't put out. My hand rose again, hovering. The knob was cool under my fingers. Somewhere behind that door was an answer, or a lie big enough to change everything. And just as I took a breath to decide, the light under the door went out. The door clicked open before I could knock. Sophie stood there, eyes red, hair pulled back like she'd been bracing for impact. The room behind her was neat, untouched, not the aftermath my mind had painted. No laughter, no chaos. Just a folder on the table and a half-packed bag. She saw the papers in my hand and flinched like I'd struck her. Please, she said, voice breaking, don't do this here. I stepped inside because my legs finally listened to something other than fear. She closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. I didn't cheat, she said fast, like ripping off a bandage. I swear to you. I know how it looks. I know the selfie was stupid. I needed air, and I chose the worst way to show it. I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. I held up the receipt. Then explain this. Explain Mark. Explain the lies. She nodded, like she'd expected every word. Mark isn't who you think, she said. He's not that. He's helping me with something I didn't know how to tell you. She slid the folder toward me. Inside were reports, dates, signatures. Medical words circled and underlined. A diagnosis. A timeline. My vision tunneled. Why would you hide this? I whispered. She reached for my hand and stopped herself, like she didn't deserve the touch. Because I was terrified, she said. Because I watched my mom fall apart when my dad got sick, and I promised myself I wouldn't do that to us. I thought I could handle it quietly, get things in order, protect you and our son. Her voice cracked on his name. I was wrong. The sunset selfie came back to me with a different weight. Freedom wasn't joy. It was a breath stolen from fear. The hotel wasn't romance. It was meetings and paperwork and long nights of pretending to be brave. And Mark? I asked. She swallowed. He's a consultant. He helped me find a specialist, arrange things fast. He thought you knew. When he realized you didn't, he panicked. I thought of his pause on the phone, The way he'd said he didn't know she was married, and felt shame burn my throat. My phone buzzed again. The unknown number. This time a text with a name. It's Claire. I work with Sophie. I tried to stop you from walking into the wrong story. Sophie closed her eyes like she'd been holding that breath for months. I plan to tell you tonight, she said. At home. I just needed 10 minutes to put the words in the right order. I looked at the divorce papers, suddenly absurd and cruel, and felt something inside me give way. Then Sophie took a breath and said the sentence she'd been saving, the one that changed the air completely. There's more, she said. The timeline isn't what you think. The treatment could work, but there's a catch. She hesitated, eyes shining. I'm not doing this alone. My heart stuttered. What do you mean? She reached into her bag and pulled out another envelope, unopened, addressed to me in her careful handwriting. Because before I can start, she said softly, there's a truth about our family I didn't know until last week. I stared at the envelope, my name shaking in my hands, and understood that the story I'd been telling myself was about to break open again. My fingers shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a lab report and a short letter in Sophie's handwriting, uneven like she'd written it through tears. The report explained it plainly. A genetic test done during routine screenings had revealed something unexpected. Our son carried a marker that neither Sophie nor I had. The doctor believed it came from a donor error at the clinic years ago, a mix-up that had gone unnoticed. Sophie wrote that she'd been chasing answers, terrified of what it meant, terrified of what I would think. She needed the specialist, the paperwork, the hotel meetings, the secrecy, all to confirm the truth before it shattered us. I didn't betray you, she wrote. I tried to protect you, and I failed at that. The room felt smaller as the weight settled. Anger surged, then drained, replaced by grief for the months we'd lost to silence. I thought of our son's laugh, his stubborn chin, the way he loved both of us with the same fierce trust. Nothing about him had changed. Only the story we told ourselves had. I looked at Sophie and saw not a stranger, but a woman drowning while trying to keep everyone else afloat. You should have told me, I said, my voice broke. She nodded, tears spilling. I know. I was wrong. I thought being strong meant being quiet. Mark knocked and then stood awkwardly at the door when Sophie opened it. He apologized, plain and human, explaining his role and his mistake in assuming honesty had already happened. Maya called later, relieved and ashamed for adding fuel without knowing the fire. Claire sent a final message wishing us courage. One by one, the shadows receded as truth took their place. We went home together that night. The divorce papers stayed folded in my pocket, heavy but unused. We sat at the kitchen table until dawn, talking in broken sentences and long pauses, saying the things we'd been afraid to say. We called the clinic and demanded accountability. We made appointments we'd been avoiding. We cried quietly so we wouldn't wake our son, then laughed softly at the absurdity of it all. Trust didn't snap back into place. It crept, careful and bruised, but real. In the weeks that followed, we chose counseling and honesty over pride. We told our son the truth in a way he could hold, that families are made by love and care, not just paperwork. Sophie began treatment with me beside her, not as a hero, not as a shield, but as a partner. Some days were hard. Some days were hopeful. Every day required showing up. I still think about that sunset selfie sometimes, how a single image nearly ended us. It taught me that secrets don't protect love, they start it. That fear can look like betrayal if you don't let the other person see it. And that self-worth isn't proven by walking away first, but by staying when staying is brave and leaving when leaving is kind. We didn't choose a perfect ending. We chose a true one. Trust is not the absence of doubt. It's the decision to face doubt together. And sometimes a second chance isn't given by fate. It's built slowly by two people willing to tell the truth and heal, even when it hurts.